We're going to get started just in a moment here. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to our conversation today with all of you.
All right, we're live, Osprey.
Great, thank you. So welcome to our Women's Earth and Climate Action Network event, Women Leading Solutions for a Healthy and Just Planet. My name is Osprey Oriole Lake, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. This event is part of the Stockholm+50 conference now taking place on the ground in Sweden. And we're very thankful to all of you for joining us today or tonight, depending on where you are. And of course, we are really excited to have all of these amazing speakers with us, some of whom are actually on the ground at the conference right now. I'm going to introduce our esteemed presenters and then offer some contextualizing comments. We're going to be hearing from Carmen Caprilis. She is the founder of Reacción, Climática, and she's also the WECAN coordinator for Latin America, and she is from Bolivia. Then we'll be hearing from Mitzi Janelle Tan. She's the convener and international spokesperson for Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, from the Philippines. And then we're going to be hearing from Dipti Bhatnagar. She is the International Program Coordinator for Climate Justice and Energy from Friends of the Earth International and is from Mozambique. Then we'll be hearing from Jacqui Patterson, the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project based in the US. And then we will be hearing from Nima Namadamu. She's the founder of SAFECO, and she is the WECAN Democratic Republic of Congo coordinator from the DR Congo. And then last but not least, certainly Casey Camp-Hornick from the Ponca Nation. She's a Ponca Nation environmental ambassador, and we're really honored to have her as our WECAN board member from Turtle Island. So just really an amazing group of leaders that we're really honored to have with us today. And just to contextualize our event, governments, business, civil society, and global stakeholders are gathering together for Stockholm+50 conference to commemorate 50 years since the first international UN summit on the environment, which led to the development of something called the 2030 Agenda and the Global Sustainable Development Goals, which some of you may have heard about over the years, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And since the 1972 Stockholm Conference, civil society has played a vital role in pushing for the implementation of international policies and frameworks to uplift social justice and environmental protections. And many civil society groups have also noted the serious constraints, limitations, and gaps of the SDGs in providing transformative and urgent actions as we face catastrophic ecological and social tipping points. So I think that's also one of the key reasons that WECAN really wanted to have this intervention. We are challenging governments to approach the SDGs with a perspective of deep structural change that leads to equitable solutions and the protection of nature. The SDGs can only be truly achieved if there is a systemic analysis that seeks to dismantle structural patriarchy, colonialism, racism, militarism, and endless economic growth models, and instead really integrates socially just environmental frameworks and indigenous traditional ecological knowledge and other ways and other knowledge sources that have been outlined by people's movements really for decades now. WECAN is engaging at Stockholm+50, advocating for women's leadership, gender diverse leadership in all areas, climate, racial and gender justice, indigenous rights, the rights of nature, and the end of fossil fuel production. During the conference, WECAN has released a set of recommendations and action steps for governments and financial institutions attending Stockholm+50 to provide a platform for this deep systemic change that I'm talking about. And the call to action we've outlined in the recommendations is for comprehensive climate justice action. The recommendations are based on frameworks of diverse global movements and represent those experiencing the brunt of impacts from the climate crisis, environmental degradation, the COVID-19 pandemic, and many, many, many other struggles that we're facing. Our call to action highlights the need for significant structural change because we really need to transform from this extractivist colonial paradigm to a sustainable paradigm of respect, restore, and replenish, and a reciprocal relationship with the land and each other. And so we really are excited about this intervention today to really open up this topic further. And all we can say is there's really no time to lose. And we all need to act now. We can act now, and we really must act now. But it's also really important that we do it from a justice framework and a rights-based framework. So with this in mind, I'm really honored to hand the floor to our panelists. And we're going to begin with Carmen Caprilis. Again, she's the founder of Reacción, Climática and the WECAN coordinator for Latin America from Bolivia, and she's on the ground in Stockholm. So please take it away, Carmen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Osprey. Well, greetings to everybody here from Stockholm. It's 7 p.m. The official events have been closed. It's been a really very thoughtful session. But it happened what everybody wanted to avoid, that it was more blah, 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 like Greta said a couple of months ago. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the commitment that we wanted, that we expect from governments. We need strong political will in order to make the changes that are needed, basically to stop what most governments have acknowledged, which is the triple planetary crisis, which is climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So important part is that governments are acknowledging that there is a problem, that we have to do something. The bad part is that nobody wants to commit, nobody wants to really take action. So although there are good intentions, really hope that in the near future, those intentions can be translated to real action. So here, well, we have a number of stakeholders that are trying to find governments accountable, and that are also proposing a number of things that are important to take into account in order to move forward the action that is needed to solve this crisis. Nevertheless, this is more, it's going to be more of a declaration, political than a political real move. So, well, we are going to follow up on what happens. We're still advocating for women's rights. We're still advocating for the right to a healthy environment. We're still advocating for climate justice, for gender justice. And we'll see what happens tomorrow. But at this stage, I don't think we can really hope for something bigger than the good intentions. Thank you. Over to you, Osprey.
Yeah, and before I let you go, Carmen, there for a minute, you know, we're not surprised. I mean, these happen a lot. That this kind of inaction by governments is not surprising at these big international forums. Can you tell us just a little bit about the presence of civil society in the space, and what civil society is doing in response to this inaction, and what spaces are there that people are really advocating in and being able to influence governments?
Well, although this has tried to be a very inclusive meeting, the spaces for civil society are quite closed. In fact, today in the plenary, we didn't get to hear any statement from civil society, which is really sad. But there are like the spaces for side events, there are the spaces for especially what the consultations were and what the different dialogues have been trying to achieve. So there's been a number of conclusions from the dialogues. There were 3 interactive dialogues that took place in the last month in order to bring the proposals here, and also the regional consultations and some country consultations also. That has been presented, and that was the space for civil society to kind of like advocate and propose and to bring their proposals to the table and so on. So the documents are going to come out in the next days or next month, but we still see we're going to see how governments react to all these proposals, to all these documents, because the systematization is still ongoing. But we want civil society to have a stronger voice in plenary and not also as contributors, second phase contributors of all what's going on. Thank you, and over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the ground there. And Carmen is also there helping us to circulate our call to action. And this is also why it's so important that we have civil society pushing back during these big high-level moments when governments are gathering together. So thank you so much for that, Carmen. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Dipti Bhatnagar. Thank you, Dipti, for joining us. You're on mute.
I'm unmuted now. Do you hear me?
Now we hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with all of you today. It's very striking, Carmen, what you were just saying about the fact that governments are recognizing some of the crises, climate, biodiversity. There's so many other crises that people are facing on the ground, multiple interrelated crises, the inequality crisis. We know who's created these problems. People are facing an unemployment crisis. People are struggling to put food on the table. And something that's really important for this session here, which is about the crisis of care that we're facing as a planet. And we have seen that this current system is completely unable to guarantee care for survival. That is the situation that we are seeing on the ground in so many places. I should introduce myself. My name is Dipti. I work with Friends of the Earth International, and I'm proudly hosted by Justiça Ambiental, Friends of the Earth Mozambique. We are fighting the Mozambique gas project in the north of the country. We're fighting land grabbing all over the country. We're seeing a complete attack on local communities in terms of dirty energy coming in all different forms, not just fossil fuels, but mega dams and land grabbing projects, false solutions coming for community land. So the problems and the crises are just so clear, and it's good that the governments are definitely starting to recognize some of them, but there are so many more that we need to include into our analysis so that we can actually center justice and that we can actually center Global South voices in the conversation going forward. As Osprey said in the very beginning, we definitely, we need to be able to stop the crises. We need to be able to do it with justice. We cannot let them say, oh, the crisis is so dire, let's throw everything at it. Let's put whatever solutions that we want. It doesn't matter. We need to stop it. And that's what we need to be really mindful of. And that's where we come to, what do we as feminists think about the solutions for the future? What is the world that we want to see? So I'm happy to share a few of them. Thank you for this opportunity. So we as Friends of the Earth International, we are working for energy solutions. So we know that we need to stop fossil fuels, to stop dirty and harmful energy. And we need to build an energy system that is going to serve people and planet. There is also an energy crisis because 800 million people on this planet do not have access to electricity, and 600 million of them live in Africa. And that is just a complete injustice. So we do need an energy system which is going to serve people. And that means we need to have renewable energy, but that also means that we cannot let renewable energy mean more land grabbing on communities, more extraction of rare earth minerals, and affecting someone else's body and someone else's community somewhere else, and for renewable energy for elites. So at Friends of the Earth International, we created a People Power Now Energy Manifesto where we talk about the principles that need to underpin the energy system that we want to see. And that includes energy sovereignty, that talks about energy sufficiency so that everyone has enough energy and no one is completely without energy and no one is abusing the amount of energy that they have. So we need to think about sufficiency. We need to think about energy democracy and just transition. These are some of the energy principles that we are working on developing. last year, Friends of the Earth Africa released a just recovery renewable energy plan for Africa. For the continent, what does it look like for the entire continent to have completely renewable energy with access for people? And it is completely financially and technically feasible. Of course, where the funding is coming from, we have lots of ideas about that too. I'm going to pop the report link into the chat. But it's definitely possible, and we can also center gender justice, and we can also have the potential to create 7 million jobs. This is just on the African continent. Of course, there's all of the other regions that we need to think about, but there's a renewable energy plan for Africa is definitely possible. As Carmen was saying, and Osprey was saying, we need the political will to be able to create that. At the same time, it's not just about energy. We also need food and land solutions for system change. And of course, we have other people on the panel who are much better placed to speak about this. But for us, we completely stand by that we need to uphold rights of indigenous peoples, peasants, local communities, artisanal fisher folk, and that needs to be a very important part of the solutions as we go forward. We need to support community forest management. We need to support peasant agroecology, and we need to keep forests out of carbon markets and out of offsetting, because the whole game of net zero, I know so many of us are talking about this now, is about allowing polluters to continue polluting, and at the same time grabbing lands and forests from communities in the global south to be used as carbon sinks, to be the next way that finance and capital expands, using lands and that communities are actually using to stay alive, and that's completely unacceptable. So we need to fight for land rights, forest rights for communities. And of course, if we have a crisis of care, that means we need to address that. We need to be able to build a new economics for people and the planet, one that values care work, one that reorganizes care work, and reorganizes care work between men, women, and the state. What role does the state play in making sure that we continue to have a civilization and an existence? So addressing the care crisis needs to be a very, very key part of the solutions that we put forward. We also need to reclaim the public sphere. I think the pandemic showed us that there are things like healthcare, education, transport, which need to be held in the public good and need to be available and accessible to everybody. And we need to have a binding treaty on transnational corporations, because they cannot be trusted to have volunteer guidelines to take care of themselves. And I think the last thing that I want to say is the value system that we bring to this work. As I was saying in the beginning, we need to center justice in all our work, center what communities on the ground are facing. We need to be able to center solidarity. And in Southern Africa, from the Bantu languages, is a phrase called Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. And that is just completely missing in the way so many of our governments speak and relate with each other. And we must be that voice. We must be that voice saying, we need to talk about the values of sufficiency, humanity, and interconnectedness of humans, because otherwise the situation's looking pretty dire, and it's completely unacceptable for all of us that the world continue to be this way and the levels of injustice be so gross and so terrible. And it's not okay, because everyone deserves a life of dignity, and that's what we're fighting for. And that change the value system needs to go along with all of the work that we do. So those are some of the solutions that so many people around us are working on that I wanted to present to all of you. I will stop there. Pass back to Osprey. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dipti, for that really powerful presentation. And, you bring up, such an important point, which I think we need to keep pushing as civil society when governments meet, and financial institutions and businesses for that matter, which is that the model that they're operating in to delay action, these false solutions like net zero or offsets, or continuing business as usual, so that some people are comfortable and other people are not, which is the system we're in of colonization and racism and patriarchy, which are really continuing these models that have such deep, egregious injustices. And the people are just not having it anymore. It's not working for people. It's not working for Mother Earth. And we really need to turn the very DNA of the system upside down and inside out. And so that's why, it's important that, we do speak out when these kinds of events take place, that it is not okay. What is happening is not okay. And we do not accept business as usual. And that, on the other hand, communities have solutions. When we look at what is happening on the ground with what, women are doing locally around food sovereignty, food security, energy resources for themselves, they're really leading the way of what we need to do. And I think it's really important to understand that a lot of times these solutions that are happening at a community level, because they are small, are not seen from a corporate level. And so they're not considered real solutions. But when you add them up, they are actual real solutions, or even United Nations studies that show us, that when you have these small organic farms, they can be a solution for food security, but they're not in the corporate model. And so they get written off. And this is what we're really trying to turn around here is to have things come from the ground up. So thank you for pointing that out. And with that, I would like to hand the floor now to our dear sister, Jacqui Patterson, founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project from the US. The floor is yours, Jacqui. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm with the Chisholm Legacy Project, and our full name is Chisholm Legacy Project, a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice leadership. And I only point that out because I'll be speaking from the perspective of Black communities in the United States and the examples and framing. So I'm actually right now in Florida on Seminole territory in a meeting on building performance standards, which is, not as dry as it sounds, but we're talking about the ways that we can make the places where we live, work, play, and pray, and more sustainable and more and healthier for the inhabitants of those buildings. And so we were in this, I was in a small group around priorities, and we talked about various things. And one of the things that we talked about was housing. And when the group was talking about housing and the need for, and talking about buildings in general, and the need for us to think about how to make how to ensure that communities are allowed to be more a part of the design and more a part of indicating deciding how the buildings are designed to be healthy and so forth. And then in the context of that, I said, yes, and we need to be thinking about not just the buildings themselves, but the land. How do we think about Indigenous rights and sovereignty? How do we think about reparations in regard to the land? So again, yes, in terms of the buildings that we're inhabitants are, but also let's think about kind of how to transform these systems a little bit more and move us back to the way things were and supposed to be in terms of this thinking and of repairing the displacement of Indigenous folks, thinking of repairing the ways that Black folks were enslaved and brought here and used as slave labor to build a nation. We talked about workforce development, and people were saying, yes, we need to make sure that these jobs are available for folks and so forth. And I said, yes, and we also need to think about local economies and how do we ensure that we have cooperative and community ownership so that it's not just about how do we do better in somebody else's job, but how do we actually own these industries and these projects ourselves. And so then we got to a point where the part of the exercise was to develop a graphic that described what was happening in our group. And we decided on a tree with roots and so the roots would kind of talk about the underpinnings of what our strategy is, and the leaves would be like what would be the result. And so people were putting various things in the root around kind of equity and so forth. And then I just kind of said, as if it was a given, oh, also, make sure we have to add dismantling capitalism and, moving us away from an extractive economy. And so there was a brief exchange, and just suffice it to say, dismantling capitalism never made it into the roots. And so that's all to say that this is really a great aligned group. And I think that in some ways it might be that they're thinking of things that would go to funders, and that, if you write a proposal to most funders and you include dismantling capitalism in there, that might quickly go into the discard pile. And so yes, there is this way that we need to be strategic about how we put things out there. And at the same time, we have to dismantle capitalism if we're going to get to where we need to be. In a couple of weeks, we as the Chisholm Legacy Project are partnering with the Children's Environmental Health Coalition, and we're putting out a report on racism and the ways that Black children are disproportionately vulnerable to climate change, COVID-19, and the economic crisis. But we know that all of those things share these common roots, which is the extractive economy in the United States. So we give these various examples. I just came back from the UN Global Platform on Disaster Risk and Reduction, so I wish I was there with you all, the folks who are in Stockholm, but that would have been a back-to-back situation that I wasn't able to manage. But there, as I listened to the stories that were told from around the world around disaster impacts and so forth, and the gender discussions around that, I of course reflected back on what was happening in the United States. We're working with a group called Ironton in Louisiana, which is a freedmen settlement, which, for those who don't know, it was a community that was founded by people who were emancipated from enslavement. And so working with a number of those communities now. And so this community was built by folks who had this dream that they would be able to rise above their ancestors being brought over to the United States as cargo in ships. And they thought that they would be able to rise above and really have a sense of dignity, a sense of prosperity, a sense of real wholeness for themselves and for their descendants. And so, but unfortunately, we all know that an extractive economy is meant to enclose wealth and power in the hands of a very, very, very finite few. And the rest of the folks are kind of used to be exploited and so forth. And unfortunately, Black communities are in the exploited category too often. And so when we look at a place like Ironton, like so many of the freedmen settlements, it has not lived up to the dreams of that handful of folks who were emancipated from enslavement and had that dream. So we have Ironton, which was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. And just as they were kind of getting back on their feet, Hurricane Ida came along last year. There were 50 homes in Ironton before Hurricane Ida, and now 7 are left standing. And so now it's a lot of female-headed households that are trying to see justice. And we have the oil company and we have a coal company, both of which are now kind of circling like vultures and trying to pressure the community to sell their land, so that to make the way for the coal company, they want to make a way for this railroad to be built through the community to take the coal from the coal plant that's next to the community to the ships for export, and to, again, the other nations around the country. So that now that we're lessening coal-based energy production in the United States, we're increasing it in other places by our coal exports. And so now the community is looking at how do they protect themselves. The people who want to stay, how can they stay? And the people who do want to go, how do they get a fair shake from this, when we know it's always an extractive relationship. We also know that in the context of disasters, that gender-based violence increases. And we saw after the BP oil drilling disaster, then the number of domestic violence cases quadrupled. And those were just from the police report. Those are the ones that were actually reported. We know that in the context of New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina and beyond, the incidence of sexual violence also increased significantly. And we also know that it's not just, that also with transgendered persons and gender expansive persons are even more at risk in those situations, as the sheltering has happened in the past on a gendered binary, either women here or men there. They've come along, but in the meantime, there are the folks who are put in harm's way from that gender binary. We also have seen in the context of the increasing heat, there's a tie between the increasing heat from climate change and maternal mortality. And already for Black women in the United States, maternal mortality rates are significantly higher than for white women in the United States. Recently, there was a heat wave, and a woman there was a heat wave last year, and a woman in Philadelphia ended up passing in the midst of her pregnancy, and she was in the last trimester of her pregnancy, and she ended up passing, as did her child. When we talk about climate forced migration, one of the places we work in is in Laredo, which is a border town in Texas. And my time is almost up, so now I have to actually. So we work with a woman from Senegal who was separated from her husband and her children. As we know, we have folks now like the governor of Texas, who is upset at the current government, federal government. And what he's doing is putting people in buses that as they come over the border and just taking them to Washington, D.C. These are like, and even with the Customs and Border Control folks, the way that they're treating people in terms of people being greeted by people on horseback with using their reins as whips, or the history of people being put in cages. And of course, these are primarily women who are coming across border, and often with their children. So there's too many examples to really name around food insecurity, around land grabbing, around energy insecurity. But in the end, just because I want to make sure I'm keeping to my time, we, in a way, as we wrote that report, we cut and pasted the same conclusion that we write for all of our papers, because the solution is always the same. We need a just transition, as articulated through the Feminist Green New Deal, the Movement, Generation, and Climate Justice Alliance Just Transition Framework, the HEMES principles, and beyond. We need to move away from an extractive economy into a solidarity economy. And women, as the title of this event goes, are already leading on those solutions around food justice, around climate finance, around keeping it in the ground, around water equity, around energy justice, and beyond. So I will hand it over, and hopefully we'll be able to talk later. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jacqui. Awesome presentation, and such beautiful, powerful work. We've put a link for all of the different speakers. We're putting links in the chat to their programs and projects. So those of you who want to connect in with any of these amazing women leaders, their information is in the chat. Thank you for all of the incredible work that you're doing, Jacqui. And I wanted to also just make just a few comments. I mean, this whole issue of the extractive economy and dismantling capitalism, and the fact that we need to be able to speak about it freely, openly, and to funders, and to everyone, to governments, to financial institutions, in our movements, because yes, we are in a system that we are dismantling at the same time, but there's no avoiding this. This is something, as you say, that must be done because it so interlocks with these injustices that you've clearly stated. And the tragedy, it's just so heartbreaking to hear these stories of, as we've talked about in the language of our movements, of having sacrifice zones and sacrifice people and sacrifice zip codes. And it's just, egregious, and it has to be stopped. And people have to have this awareness, and you always bring our attention to those key people and places that really need to be voiced and seen and not invisibilized somewhere out there. The sacrifice mentality has to stop. And that is tied into the whole economic injustice that you were talking about. And lastly, I just wanted to point out, you were talking about, these health harms. It's not out in the future, the climate crisis and the impacts of the fossil fuel industry on Black communities, and particularly Black women. So Catherine, maybe you could put in the chat report we did, and maybe Jacqui has some as well, on the gendered and racial impacts of the focil fuel industry, particularly on women of color. And I really wanted to to really punctuate what you said. I think it's really important. And then Jacqui, you also mentioned several reports from the Climate Justice Alliance, the Feminist Green New Deal. And Catherine, maybe you could put into the chat that series of frameworks. And some of them include some of the projects and things that you've mentioned, Jacqui. So we'll go ahead and do that as well. And thank you for pointing out those frameworks of climate justice. And with that, and we'll come back around to all the speakers in a bit, I'm really honored to introduce Nima Namadamu. She's the founder of SAFECO, and she is the WECAN Democratic Republic of Congo coordinator in the DR Congo. And we're just so honored to have her here today. And we're going to actually start with the video that she wanted to show and then go into her presentation. So we're going to take a minute for a video and then hear from Nima.
When I come back here after 25 years, I was shocked. When I was a little girl, the forest was here. And when I was here, I see no more trees. Idea was how again people can bring life back.
As the climate crisis increases, scientists are telling us that one of the most important things that we can do is to protect forests and biodiversity. The Congo Basin is one of the largest and most important forests of the world, only second to the Amazon in terms of size. And there we are reforesting damaged lands that due to extractive industries, agricultural business, have been completely turned into deserts.
We have now 500 women. They are planting those trees. And when you planting trees, you are owner of those trees and you are owner on the land. That is not usual on our culture, women to have some propriety, some ownership. That gives us really confidence.
Ibi byose nijoro biteye kandi nije uzubibagarira iri ni ishyamba ryanje.
75% of the trees are going to rewilding the forest. Some of them now are 20 feet tall, and we're quickly seeing the forest begin to regenerate, and 25% are for human use so that we can ensure that we're protecting the 1.6 million acres of old-growth forest. This is where their food comes from, where their medicines come from, where the things they need for their homes come from, their pharmacy.
Ibiti akamaro ko kubitera icyo bimarira n'icyo mbitegeyemo cyane ni ukugira ngo tuzongere tubone imvura muri iki gihugu cyacu ibiti byarashize. Turifuza yuko ibino biti za weekend zokomeza tukongera tukagarura amashamba.
Women, they are now protecting environment with trees. Women of Itombe forest, natural forest from DRC, we are trying to protect our environment.
We're now protecting 1.6 million acres of old-growth forest over the years as we reforest in the Congo Basin.
Kuko byamariye njewe ku giti cyanje bimpesha iheba nziza muri iki gihugu cyacu.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a real need to develop more food sovereignty and food security. So now not only in the nurseries that we have are we planting sapling trees, but also lots of food for the local communities.
Vegetables we did really help so much. People to have vegetables to fight with malnutrition.
And the women are just so proud to not only be planting trees and healing their damaged homelands, but also protecting this old-growth forest for all of us, for doing their part in mitigating the climate crisis. So for all of these things, it's a very comprehensive project that's lifting up women, lifting up Indigenous peoples and their traditional ways of life, protecting old-growth forest and reforesting damaged lands.
All of these forests will become soon big one, and we want to really to have again bring new oxygen. Wind will be stopping winds, and really very, very, very important. Trees, their life.
Thank you so much for that beautiful words in the video. Neema, now the floor is yours. Thank you, Neema.
Thank you so much for giving me this big opportunity to be speaking and talking about climate justice and gender equality participation. My name is Nima Namadamu. I'm from DRC Congo in East Congo right now. And also we are on the front line working with community. That is our work every day. Where I can add on this video, I think we are now grown up and we are planting more trees. And also where I was talking with my Jacqui and the other colleague speaking about climate justice, gender equality, participation, government and civil society and other leaders through this crisis. We have global crisis is really kind of pointing, I can say, the participation of leader. First of all, this leadership, the governments and leader globally, leader decision maker, what they are doing right now, they are busy with war. Right now, we can't work without peace. That is the number one. And this really is killing us as community on the ground. For example, in DRC, where we live, where we have our forest, the natural Itombe forest, there we don't have a road. We don't have hospital. We don't have cleaning water. We don't have cars, but we have guns and bombs. That is where it is really killing us. Just right now, maybe 1 week ago, what is now between Rwanda and the DRC, wars again begin fighting insecurity. That means the global leaders, they are so busy fighting with this kind of power, title, and that patriarchal system, capitalism, like Jacqui said, with like, I want to possessing this. And we are really fighting and suffering with the consequence about our first leader made it. For example, in Africa, people that are fighting with borders, and the border, African borders was made without any one African in the presence. That was in 1980, I think, I don't know when, but when they devised Africa, in Belgium, in Germany, Berlin conferences, that is where they devised Africa. And still today, we are people dying, 100 million people, because they are fighting because borders. That is the number one thing is killing us, African as a continent. And also African also is number one for solution. That is where if you can helping us, as we can influence on leaders to make peace, because Africa is the mother continent and is where we have opportunity to planting again, gives back life. Because in Africa, we still have big land, we can planting the trees, we can fight with climate change. That is the only one solution. Please, if we globally, women especially, we can influence peace. That is the number one. We can get everything done in seconds. I'm really happy to have a participant to these conferences to let people globally is bleeding. Whole planet is bleeding. Look in Europe with Russia, with everything. Now DRC, Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, whole GRAC regions is on bleeding, refugee everywhere. And when the refugee goes everywhere where is not not planning for houses. They cut trees. They are trying to build the shelters. That insecurity make also contribute to climate change. They cut trees. They try to make living those people, because from 1994, people who make genocide in Rwanda, they fled on our forest. Until today, they live there. The women now, where we are looking, we are trying to work so hard to bring back this claim. We work together. Second things I'm going to do now is talking about, I finished talking about leadership, our authority, our government. They are really full. That is, don't talk about them. When they are busy doing those war fighting, doing minerals, taking minerals from Africa, women, they are busy planting trees, taking care of community. Second point I wanted to make is, please giving government, community value, the work they are doing. Women, you can't separating women with the community. When men, they're doing all those fighting or conflict, creating, doing meeting, women, they are working in the community. Please, government or civil society, give value of worker, of value, like gives the little value of community, how we are working together. Community really is still today, we are working so hard. For example, when we are working in our community in Hope Plateau, Itombwe, Minembwe, Fizi territories, we are working on like 4 territories. Those women, they are really doing good with fighting with malnutrition. We get, last year, we get support from WECAN. We did planting vegetables. We're planting 4 space of vegetables, sorghum, soya, and vegetables, all these kind of for fighting with malnutrition. Now we don't have malnutrition. And women now, we need, for example, when they was going to bring trees, planting trees, they say, we need a car. That is my first things to talk today, because to take all things on head is really heavy. They say, oh, this, if we can get a car and we can driving, planting, everyone is planting on the ground, take a car or trees and they can planting all day. That will be really kind of where we want. Things we can do planting that we have now, we are looking for grounded, for maize, for to have a flour, to have a food, that community things we are looking for. And also we need water. I worked last month in March with MONUSCO, UN. They came and now we are doing a project about water. That is a kind of community when women, they are leading, they are on the frontline solution to have water and to have vegetables, to fight with food security. That is the solution we have now. And this is the things we are looking for to get really more and more. And our vision is to plant everything we can have. Thank you so much for really giving me this opportunity. And I think we will talk more, and I wish you the best. I think we have everything we are talking about, and it soon we will be talking and asking a question if you want. Will you have my link?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neema, for those very powerful words and the incredible work that you're doing. And also just to really acknowledge the amazing courage it takes for all of these women to be doing this community work that Neema is telling us about in war zones, you know, on top of it all, and being displaced. We've worked a lot, you know, Neema and I worked very closely in the last few years around, you know, having displacement camps and then where to grow the food, and you know, operating in these very tragic and difficult war zone situations, as Neema said. So I just really wanted to thank you for your courage, as well as the vision and energy that you bring to this work. You know, the thing is, as you point out, and I'm really glad that you did, that part of this dismantling, we were talking earlier about dismantling capitalism, is also dismantling militarism and this patriarchal, militaristic, colonized system that is so harmful to our communities and well-being, as you've pointed out so well. And like that has got to stop. We need to move away from those paradigms, and to also talk about the international community that puts pressure on countries in Africa for land grabs, for minerals, and we're all connected in this. We're all connected in these harms. We're all connected, and we have to really see our collective, not only our collective mutual responsibility, but our mutual need for mutual aid and support for community work that Nima was pointing out. So thank you for that very, very much. And to really highlight, that none of us are going to be alive without these forests, without the biodiversity, without the communities Nima's talking about, ensuring that they're well taken care of, ensuring that they have food sovereignty and security, ensuring that their knowledge and language is preserved. It's all connected to how we're all going to collectively survive. So thank you so much for your work. And we will come back around to you as well. And now I'd like to welcome Mitzi Janelle Tan. Again, she's the convener and international spokesperson for Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines. And we're really honored to have you here with us, Mitzi, who also is on the ground right now at the Stockholm+50 conference in Sweden. Thank you, Mitzi, for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry for being a bit late. I came straight from another panel here at the Stockholm+50 conference. And really, what I came from was also another feminist panel. It was so powerful to see different women coming together from different backgrounds, talking about climate justice and what climate justice should look like. And it's the same for this panel. I am always so honored to be with such strong and powerful women. And I think this is how we build climate justice. In the Philippines, our current president is running rampant on misogyny. President Duterte, at a briefing for a super typhoon once was joking with the staff there that people were dying, that this person died because he did not have enough sex with the girls because it was the pandemic lockdown. This president has said rape jokes in front of millions of people in his official speeches. This president has said that women rebels should be shot in the private part because that way they are rendered useless. That is the type of misogyny that we are experiencing with our president, and it's reflecting in the military as well, with our military saying that young women wearing short shorts calling for the protection of the environment are doing it to entice young men to join the rebel army. So let's kind of break that down, how young girls were reduced to or objectified to tools to entice young men, and our culture for the protection of the environment were criminalized and said that we are terrorists. And so we really see that these are also the same leaders, these fascist leaders that are hindering climate action. It is also these same leaders that are continuing the oppression in our countries. Now we have our new president is the son of the dictator from 50 years ago. Marcos Sr. was the dictator, and how his son Marcos Jr. is president. And then his vice president is the daughter of President Duterte now. So we're seeing how it is the same brand of rich men and also women sometimes who are oppressing the people and hindering true climate action. It's not just in the Philippines. We saw that with Trump. We saw that with Bolsonaro. We're seeing that across the world, how these rich elite men, usually especially from the global north, are hindering climate action, climate justice. And so we're seeing it here in the Stockholm+50 conference, where even to get here, our young climate activists, especially from Africa, could not come because of visa restrictions. And I would like to reflect, as my previous panelists already mentioned before us, it is more than just an environmental issue. It's a systemic issue. It's capitalism, it's colonialism, it's imperialism. That is what caused the climate crisis. And so this system that caused the climate crisis cannot bring us out of it. So the solution of climate justice is to imagine a world and build that world together. Imagine a world outside of capitalism. And I know it's so difficult because if this is what you're constantly seeing, how do I know what that looks like? But we look into communities. We look into the indigenous communities, the small farming communities. There is a community in the Philippines. They are a farming community and they are led by women. And with landlessness rampant in the Philippines, they have taken back the land from the landlords and they're feeding their community. They have gone away from the monocrop plantation system of farming in the Philippines, and they are planting organically and the soil is healing. And this, as someone mentioned already earlier, these small initiatives that we don't realize are the answers to the climate justice, to the climate crisis. This is what we need to listen to. This is what we need, because I think someone already mentioned earlier as well, it's not enough just to transition into a renewable energy system. We need to make sure that the renewable energy system that we transition to is also just. Otherwise, it's already happening in the Philippines. Farmers are being pushed out for solar farms. Indigenous peoples are being pushed out for hydroelectric dams. The extraction of minerals from our soils, from our land to create these technology is destroying the planet and harming environmental defenders. So what we need right now is women leading the way, women from all sectors, especially from the most marginalized sectors, towards climate justice. We need to get rid of this system completely. These forums, they are helpful, but I don't fool myself into thinking that this is where climate justice will be achieved. It's not going to happen in a plenary. It's not going to happen in a meeting room. In these forums, in these conferences, we have the opportunities to create policies that will bring us towards climate justice, that will bring us towards a better world. But the power has to be built in the communities, on the ground, in the grassroots level. These conferences are opportunities for us to build power and connect globally. And I'm so glad that we have learned to do this over Zoom as well. I don't remember this being a thing as much before the pandemic. And I would never say that if there was a positive thing to take away from the pandemic. I hate that we had to go through that for us to realize. But this is something that we need to take away as we start going back into the world. And we have to make sure that every step of the way, we have that care. Someone mentioned it earlier. So many times, care and love and joy are seen as weak features because they're feminine features. But these are the characteristics and the values of our Mother Earth, and our mothers, our parents. Why are we shunning away from it? Climate justice is about joy. Climate justice is about care and gentleness and love. And that's why I love women, because we can be fierce, we can be angry, we can be scary, but we are also loving. We are also caring. We are all of this together, and everyone should have the chance to be this. That is what climate justice looks like to me in places where I know I'm with people who are like-minded. I no longer tell the, I guess, more concrete ideas of climate justice. We all know it's reparations from the global north to the global south, a just transition, all these things. But for me, when I get the chance to speak about climate justice, I want to invite people to think of their joyful moments, their moments where they feel the safest. That is the climate just world that we are building. That world where we can breathe. My climate justice world looks like a world where I am singing with my friends in every language. That is true international collaboration. And if we can show people what that looks like, then people are closer to seeing that it is something that we can fight for, and that it's something that we can create and build together. Build that power outside and during these conferences, and be so strong together that the leaders, the people in charge, have no choice but to listen to the true leaders of the movement. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful words, Mitzi. And this is also why it's so great to have youth voices, I have to say, bringing in the wisdom and the joy and the power of what our youth are calling forth and envisioning and imagining is so important to us. So thank you, Mitzi, for those really powerful analysis that you gave us at the beginning, but also helping us to really imagine, what is it the world that we are summoning forth? What are we calling forth? And really holding on to that, because we really need that. I mean, people are really struggling. These are challenging times in so many ways, as we're hearing, but also how do we create those islands of imagination that we can build on? So thank you for helping us to see that, and for all of your work in the Philippines. And it's just really also heartbreaking, of course, to hear the circumstances you're operating under. And I know some of our other colleagues in the Philippines are also reporting, a lot of challenge around the land defenders there now, a lot of criminalization and violence against the land defenders. And again, this is why, we need to, as you pointed out so well, a deep systemic change, because we can't put a Band-Aid on this. This is something that takes structural change. So thank you very much for your leadership and for being at the conference and standing up and building power there for our communities and in our movements. We'll come back around to the speakers again, but I'm now very, very honored to have Casey Camp-Hornick of the Ponca Nation Environmental Ambassador and honored WECAN board member. She will be speaking to us. I think she had a little problem with her video, so we're going to be showing a beautiful photograph of her while we hear from Casey. You have the floor.
Tatia is usually Bank of my state bank, Oklahoma. I've been really looking forward to this moment, and I thank you for allowing me to be part of this. My true name is Judy. I'm a member of the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma, in the occupied territory where 36 tribes were forcibly removed in the centuries before this with Andrew Jackson's removal policy, so that they could be able to take over the indigenous territories and create these places that now are called the extractive industries, now are these multi-generational farming and ranching dynasties, and privatization of the lands and the waters and the airs have begun to happen in virtually every area. Presently, I'm in this place called Montana with my daughter, who's at an MMIP gathering. And I'm here with my true honor and my true understanding of where I'm going to be here to take care of my grandchildren with my companion, so that we can free their mother, the next generation, to be able to care for the generations to come. This is the territory that once was home to the Cheyenne, Lakota, Crow, Arapaho, the Gros Ventre, Mandan, and Arikara, and many, many, many others that came to these sacred places and didn't stay, but moved on. Right now, the Lakota and the Gros Ventre are hosting us, whether they know it or not. I want to say thank you to all the wisdom keepers that have been in front of me speaking here and enlightening me and teaching me, from the youngest to the eldest, from the east to the west and the north to the south, from the down to the up, and through this sacred water that I'm holding in my hand. I want to ask for your guidance and your wisdom to be able to say what it is that our Mother, the Earth, is asking us to respond to. I first need to acknowledge the natural laws that was the understanding before colonization of all of our peoples, wherever we were blessed to be born and to raise our families and to be part of the living system in the natural laws, to be informed by the Mother Earth, by the Father Sky, by the fire, by the air, and by the living things around us, those with roots, those with wings, those with forelegs, those with fins, and the water herself. on how we were supposed to conduct ourselves, not as separate entities, but as entities with one destiny, and that is to care for one another, love one another, and create a place for the generations to come in whatever form they might be. I'm watching things on this television thing that talks about this queen, they call her, in England, and the glorification of the colonizers. And it's continuing to be the fairy tales of the prince and the princess and the queens and the kings that are the very beginning of this thing called the doctrine of discovery that has created the situation that has allowed us and encouraged us to be able to buy into this myth that is taking place all around the earth right now. It's time for us to call out the oligarchs of the fossil fuel regime as the mass murderers that they are. It's time for us to call out how we do not accept monarchs to be the leading voice of how the capitalist society conducts business on our behalf. It is time for all of us to look at people like you that have spoken before me about how we create again the old ways of being at the time that we are informed with how to behave by our mother, the one true mother we all share, the Mother Earth, the one true father we all share, the Father Sky, and to help stop the understanding that privatization of the sacred is something that is allowable and acceptable anymore. The way that all things have changed in the past is within our own societies, within our own grassroots movements, within the uprising of the voices of the youth to be able to tell us what it is they need and see for a way to go forward in this world. It's time that we stop the mass murderers. We can remember, those of us who are elders, of a time without plastics, of a time that we didn't have cars even, or be able to even consider flying to another place to take that information to the people who should hear us. I'm grateful to WECAN that it's brought us together in this virtual space, this web of life that has always existed, but now humankind has learned how to communicate through a different way, and that's this way we're doing right now. It used to be through mind and spirit that we could reach across to each other and we could travel to one another in a good, safe way. This is another safe way that we're able to do that. It's time that we look at this land back movement as a movement of spirituality, which is where we are supposed to be based. The understanding of land back can deal with the public lands. It can deal with the areas that were once for instance, the Ponca, Sacred Head is the name of our people, once lived in Nebraska, now called Nebraska. And we were caretakers of the Ogallala Aquifer, and we did not abuse her. We were caretakers of Nishude, the sacred river, now called the Missouri, and we did not abuse her. We were relatives to the buffalo. We rode our horses. We had sacred corn that was passed down from generations. We recognized what is now called wild crafting, what lived around us that was willing to share life with us. And those are the ways of economy that we have to come back to be able to trade with one another, the things that are of value. You know, there are many of us of the indigenous nations that are looking for North and South America to be connected to the central portions and to reopen those old trade routes. When I was up here talking to my grandkids about this territory we're in, I was telling them that the Ponca at one point were the ones that put the medicine wheel up on what they called the Grand Tetons now. Even though we traveled that far, we knew that these are our neighbors. We had to learn to understand what is their territory that it takes them to be able to live on. What is the territory for their hunting and fishing and roaming that will keep them healthy, where they don't wear out their portion of Mother Earth? And the same with the Ponca. We had 18 village sites that we circulated around. So we're looking at things now about the circular economy. We're calling out our governments within our sovereignty to create statutes that are the rights of nature, recognizing that we are not separate from nature, but in fact, we are nature itself. And we're trying to protect ourselves as a species from becoming extinct. This thing they call climate change is actually the purification of our Mother, the Earth, and our Father, the Sky. And they are doing the best they can for all living things to recreate an imbalance that has been created by humans. And that comes in the form of drought in some territories, excessive rain in others. It comes in big storms. It comes in all the ways that are shifting how humans are going to have to survive on Earth. So with all the wisdom that everyone is sharing here, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at as our way of how do we look at ourselves, rather than in Oklahoma and places where we have the largest imprisonment of women, and especially women of color, of any place. We had a mass murder yesterday of an addicted human being to pain pills. The gun laws have to be changed. And all of these things have to come from us, because we know what body sovereignty means to us, rather than them putting in laws that tell us what we can do with our bodies. We of the AIM movement, the American Indian movement, in the 1970s stopped the forced sterilization of our women, because they were trying to tell us what we could do with our bodies. It is possible for us to do that, because we live in multi-generational places, and because our education from our culture has been replaced with non-Indigenous viewpoints, world viewpoints. It has changed who we are and how we're structured to live. It's time for us to reclaim those things, to reclaim the very religion that kept us in a circle way of being. All things, all natural laws live in a circle. The Moon Mother governs the rhythm in a circle and in a cycle. The sun moves around, the same with the earth. Even the birds make their nest in a circle. The cycle of the seasons is in a circle. The great ocean herself has her own ways of teaching us. We have to go back to those understandings. Our people are dealing with housing things, just as was mentioned by another of our incredible panelists here. We're looking at reclaiming our earthen lodges, and we haven't had one in 150 years. So we're trying right now to build the first one in this new Ponca territory, not our traditional lands, but maybe that's next. And those earthen lodges are made from earth and wood, and they are good to all of this thing called climate change. They protect from storms. They keep you warm without using electricity or propane, but with deadfall that's all around in various areas. If we're careful on how we use it, it keeps us cool in the summer without air conditioning. Maybe that's something that we can begin to do, small projects, small individual places for people, maybe not to live year round, but to at least have for parts of the year that make it possible for us not to be such terrible consumers. Survival is not just something that we have to strive for, but it is our very responsibility. And it is a sacred duty that we have to be able to look at our little children, look at our kids, and see how asthma has become a norm, how the allergies are climbing, so everyone is having to deal with those, how the coastal flooding is bringing people inwards, and how we're going to caretake one another. There is no such thing to me as as these boundaries, these things that they draw on an imaginary piece of paper, an imaginary line that separates us. The inclusiveness of a woman who can breastfeed a child on each breast if there is need in an area where there's no food for that child. That's how we have to be with one another from this time on. We have to stop them from believing that you can buy and sell the air, that the water belongs to any one particular place or one particular people. These natural laws have their ways. The water will flow. The winds will blow. The plants will grow. The earth will purify. Will humans continue to be part of this sacred cycle? I say yes. And I say that we, you and I, all of us who are together today, are going to be the ones who create those situations. This thing called unemployment, let's make that be a way of rebuilding. Instead of looking at the payment for building this earthen lodge, the repayment in our community is going to be of teaching youth how to make a home that they can do in their own little space. It's going to be feeding them every day. It's going to be song. It's going to be drum. It's going to be community. And that's an employment of a whole different sort that's been forgotten. But during that time, they're going to turn off those little machines. They're going to be present on the Mother Earth. They're going to be laughing. They're going to be learning. They're going to be speaking the words of our Mother Earth, even if we're in this common language that we're all together now. But anyway, I give great, huge thanks to all that is and all of you for this day. We have the opportunity. These things can, will, and must change. And you are those seeds of resistance. I say thank you. Wigaha Sha.
Thank you so much, Casey, for those powerful words and really grounding us in being at home with the water and our food and the land and all the beauty and the wisdom that you shared. Thank you very, very much, Casey. I just feel that one of the big messages from all of you esteemed presenters today is, this message about us really caring for our home circle, our self-care, building community. And, as I was saying earlier, understanding that these small steps are actually the solution. These steps that we're taking to rebuild the world that we know is possible. And it's amazing how much we're seeing this pulling from ancestral wisdoms, from traditional ecological knowledge of Indigenous peoples, from, people who are non-Indigenous going into their own ancestral knowledge of how their peoples lived in reciprocity with the land. And part of this dismantling is also about reclaiming and rebuilding these spaces that we once knew and need to be remembered and rebuilt and restored. And I think that is a beautiful message to share with our world community, with quote unquote, the powers that be, because Mother Earth, as Casey said, is going to straighten all of this out. I mean, we're not going to fight with the laws of physics and the laws of nature. We are going to abide by Mother Earth's laws because that is the way. And, the climate crisis and a lot of these crises that we're facing are due to the imbalance that Mother Earth is showing that we've had. So with that, I know we're coming to the close of our time. And I just wanted to ask if Neema or Mitzi, who are still with us, if you wanted to have any closing comment before we close our panel for today. Casey, thank you so much for your powerful weaving all of our conversation together. But I just love to hear if Neema or Mitzi wanted to have any closing comments, and then we'll go ahead and close the panel. I did want to mention that because Casey does a lot of powerful work on rights of nature, and both she and I are on the committee for the Global Alliance for Rights of Nature. And there is a session that will be happening tomorrow in Stockholm, and it will also be online live stream, Uplifting the Rights of Nature movement. If people want to learn more about that, as Casey talked about, like how do we, in our current structures of law, how can we interpret respecting the natural laws of the earth? And the whole rights of nature movement is so powerful, in tandem with the land back movement of getting land back to Indigenous peoples. So I wanted to highlight that that's happening in Stockholm. And then the other event that WECAN is engaged in, an initiative of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is an initiative to phase out fossil fuels and fast track climate solutions that was really inspired by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In other words, giving a model of how governments can phase out fossil fuels and really enter a treaty to do so. So this is a very important dialogue that is also going on with governments right now that civil society is pushing forward. So with that, let's go to Neema and then Mitzi for some closing words. Neema?
Okay, thank you so much. I think we need more women in civil society and also to influence the global decision maker for making. We are obliged, Mother Earth, to be where he wanted to be. We are all in this case, and with wisdom, with women wisdom, I think we'll survive. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Neema. Mitzi?
I would love to have everyone maintain this connection and to keep having these spaces and to build these spaces together, because this is where power comes from. This is where climate justice will come from. And I think it's so powerful every time that we are able to connect across the globe in whatever way possible. And I think that is how we truly bring down imperialism and capitalism, by coming together as one community. So thank you everyone for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the presenters. Casey, it was so good that we could hear your voice so clearly, and just know that we saw a beautiful image of you while you were speaking. Thank you for joining us. And we will continue to advocate at Stockholm+50 for everything that we discussed today. Thank you to all of the esteemed presenters and for all of the audience for joining us. And we see all your comments. We're going to be collecting the information that we shared in the chat and making sure that's available to all of you who have participated. And also for those of you who have joined us on the live stream, we'll make sure to also post a lot of these links for you. And, let's stay together. We really do need each other. These multiple crises are piling on. And so we need each other now more than ever. And I think these networks of women and gender diverse leaders are critical. And we welcome everyone to continue to work with us and to continue on. The struggle goes on, the solutions go on. Thank you, and have a really good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.